On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Remy. And Remy was married to an intimidating, hypocritical abuser. It's a story of jealousy, projection, infidelity, the abuser dying, and grief. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Remy. How are you?
Doing well today. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking. And if you want to be a guest like Remy is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Click on the guest form button, fill it out, and press the submit button. Also, we have a support group at our website. We have Zoom meetings every Wednesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. And we have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you. That is our support group at narcissistapocalypse.com. And we also have a newsletter at narcissistapocalypse.com. And you get a free workbook for every new survivor story with every new newsletter. That is weekly, all at narcissistapocalypse.com. And we do have a content warning for today as we do discuss physical abuse in this story. So that is your content warning for today. And today you're going to hear Remy's story. And Remy was married to a jealous hypocrite. He was volatile, but there were also good times. He was fun when he was fun. But eventually the bad times came roaring back one day and they just didn't stop. And Remy did leave and was healing, but then the abuser died, and this brought back the abuse in a different way, and she was forced to relive the trauma of it all once again. And I know Remy is going to validate so many of you out there today, so now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Remy, the floor is now yours.
Okay, thank you so much. I did not come from a background where there was, a lot of childhood trauma or anything like that. I was raised in a great household, wonderful family. I come from a really big family. My grandparents were Mormons, had a lot of kids who then also had a lot of kids. So I had a lot of aunts, uncles, cousins, and I have one sibling. And she and I are really close in age. So we've always been really close throughout our lives. And my parents are still married. And as far as them being role models and things like that, my dad was kind of the traditional man of the house, earned the money, but mom ran the household. And she didn't take any crap from my dad ever. So with those two parents, my sister and I grew up to be very independent. We were very strong-willed. We had our own ideas. We were also empathetic towards other folks. We both are in helping industries today and, self-starters. We're just both very strong people. And we understand how to treat and be treated in relationships. So my background, though, at some point in this relationship that I'm going to talk about, it did start to get used against me a little bit because I was told I was a princess and that I expected too much and that I didn't know how to be part of a team. I was too independent. So when I was growing up and going to school, my ex that I'm going to be talking about, we lived in the same town. We went to different schools in elementary school, but we did go to our middle school and high school together, and we graduated the same year. We were almost exactly the same age. We didn't know each other in school. I knew who he was. He knew who I was, but we didn't actually start talking to each other until many years later when Facebook came about, and we had both been through marriages, had children, had established careers, and he happened to reach out to me one day on Facebook Messenger and just was hardcore, just asking me a bunch of questions. He was very flirty. He said, I saw some of your pictures. You look like you're a fun person. And then he asked me questions like, are you married? Are you divorced? Are you single? And then he's like, are you straight? Are you gay? Bi-curious? Exploring? That kind of took me aback a little bit. I was like, wow, we've been talking for 5 minutes and you're already asking me some very personal questions. So, and at the time I remember saying to him, well, you get right to the point, don't you? That's unusual. So when I was thinking about when I could pinpoint that the abuse started, looking back now, I can say it started immediately because he was digging for information right away. Because a lot of the things that we talked about in those first few weeks and months, they came up in fights later. And he was love bombing from the get. Constantly calling, constantly texting, constantly messaging. Immediately, he said, "How would you feel about flying to Southern California and having dinner with an old classmate?" And, this is within days of us first starting talking. So it started from the beginning. It truly did.
So when he says something like that, are you flattered by something like this? Like, what's going through your mind? Do you go back and maybe try to find old pictures of this person, or start thinking about what they were like or what you knew of them because you didn't know them? And was he the cool guy? Who was he in that old era that makes him maybe more enticing at this age? Or maybe he wasn't anything that you thought of in that era, but now he's made something of himself, or maybe that's what's attractive to you. Oh, this person has come a long way. What is it about this person from, them of their past to this, where maybe it becomes flattering or something along those lines?
I knew him as one of the cool kids in high school. So there were still very much shades of that coming through. I'm like, wow, this good looking athlete. He was so popular. He had so many friends. And now he's talking to me, who way back in the day was this shy little band geek. I didn't date. I didn't have boyfriends in high school. I was all about band and all about my homework. And so to me, it was very flattering. I didn't have to look up pictures because I knew I had a very clear picture in my head who he was. I thought he was adorable back then. He was still adorable. And when he started talking about he had been in the Navy, and he started talking about his son, and he actually disclosed some kind of hard times that he'd gone through because the first child that he and his wife had passed away. So he was telling me very personal things right up front and kind of gaining my empathy. And it sounded like he had a very exciting life. And so that was very flattering. And I had just finalized my divorce from my first husband. It had taken about a year. And so I was single. I was living in a nice place. I had my older two kids with me. I had a roommate. We had this big, beautiful house, and we were just having a really great time. So I thought, well, it's not a bad idea to talk to this guy. I can entertain it.
So here comes this person from your past, and in a weird way, you're kind of transported all the way back in time, and you kind of have him maybe on a little bit of a pedestal because of that, where in reality with someone else coming in, they wouldn't have that type of pedestal that they would be on, but you kind of been put back there. You just didn't realize you did it. If that makes sense?
It does make sense. Yes, absolutely. It had that feeling of high school crush type of thing.
And you're being chosen.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And it was like I was singled out, and that was amazing and flattering. And he seemed, the more I talked to him, very worldly too. And that was exciting. And in the first, months up to a year that we were communicating, we would visit each other. We lived in different states, and he had all these amazing things that he wanted to show me where he lived in Southern California. We went to concerts. We went to baseball games. We went to these amazing restaurants that he knew. We went out to dance clubs and parties with friends and coworkers of his. And we just had the greatest time going back and forth, doing all these things and hanging out, really. And his parents actually live in the state that I live in. So despite the fact that he's been away from his home for, 20 plus years at this point, been in the Navy, traveled the world, he would always go back to his parents' house for Christmas. So when the holidays came around, first year we were together, We went and visited his parents. He introduced me to them. And so I really got to know his mom and dad and his brother and sister-in-law. He only has one brother. That was kind of something we bonded over. He had one brother, younger brother. I had one younger sister. And so we had our family units were still intact when a lot of our friends came from divorced parents and things like that. And honestly, I still have a great relationship with his parents and his brother, despite what went on between the two of us. And one thing I started noticing, though, especially as our relationship went on, was that even though his dad was very, very nice to me all the time, very loving and very caring, it was very obvious what he expected of his wife. He was bossy. He demanded that she take care of him. And he literally expected her to do everything, regardless of what she was doing. He would yell her name, state what it is he needed in that moment, and she would bring it to him. She would do it for him, whatever was going on in that moment. And then when my ex and I would talk about it later, he would put the blame on his mom and say, well, she set the precedent by doing everything for him in the first place. So now he just expects it. And that's just the way they are. So noted. And then when we were first communicating and having conversations, he would say things in conversations, whether we were on the phone or whether we were, at each other's houses, because we were still visiting back and forth, traveling back and forth to see each other, that would indicate to me he had either read an email or had looked at a phone record and was asking about, say, a number that he saw in there. And it was very strange. And I was not a suspicious type. So I just thought, oh, he must be really smart or really intuitive or something. And one of the big issues that was a problem from the beginning for us was the fact that we both had kids. So therefore, we both had ex-partners who were the other parents of those kids. And we both had to communicate with those exes in order to, see children and facilitate visitation with the other parent. He talked to his ex all the time, almost daily, because that's how often their son was going back and forth between the two of them. When I talked to my ex, in order for the children to travel back and forth between us, it was suspicious and it was a problem. And he wanted to know every detail of what we had talked about. Did he come into your house? Did you go into his house? And so on and so forth. So that was a huge bone of contention between the two of us. And he, from the beginning, accused me of continuing to interact and have an intimate relationship with my ex-husband.
So when he's doing that, how do you respond to that? And what are your feelings? And how do you excuse it away? Or, what happens that you kind of leave it alone?
We have big arguments about it because, of course, I defend myself. And, there were times when I would go into my ex's house because the kids wanted to show me something or something along those lines, or I wanted to see where he was living. And so, and I felt perfectly justified in doing that because this man is going to be caring for my children. So yes, I want to see where he's living, what his house looks like. And yes, I want to see the pumpkins they carved together, right? So I would just be honest about it and say, this is what we did. And he would get so jealous that he would make accusations about, you did more than that, just be honest. And then he would throw it back at me every time we would argue after that, right? So I remember pumpkin carving day, so I know you're up to something. Just random things like that. I had never been accused of anything like that by anyone that I'd had a relationship with before. So it took me completely aback. So of course I was going to argue and defend myself and try to convince him that that's not me. That's not what I do. And I would also try to be reasonable and say, well, you have an ex. You talk to her all the time because you have a son together. I'm doing the same thing. You accusing me of continuing to sleep with my ex is like me accusing you of continuing to sleep with your ex who you claim you hate. So I would try to be reasonable and rational. And I can just tell you right now that that never worked. It never worked. But my rational brain wanted so badly to try to convince him that what he assumed was wrong that I just couldn't stop arguing with him about it. So that's what I did. I just continued to fight with him about it when it would come up. So I have a couple of kind of major events, and these events stick out in my mind because I would later come to dissect them and process them as our relationship was breaking up. But when we were first, dating, going back and forth, that went on. The long distance thing went on for over a year. And we went to do things, concerts and so forth. And one of the big ones that we went to, it was a concert in California. There were several heavy metal bands there. And he called me up one day and was so excited because he bought these tickets. He bought the tickets already. And he said, so you could fly down this day, fly back this day, and you'd be in time to go to work the next day. And I was going, wait a minute. I first don't know if I have that much paid time off. I don't know if I can make those arrangements this soon. And you're telling me you want me to fly back late at night and then go directly to work the next day, when that is very hard on me because I had done it several times before in visiting this man. And he always wanted to make sure that I stayed wherever he was at until the very last minute, then fly back and not have like any downtime in between to settle back in, catch up, jet lag, things like that, unpack even. So it was kind of I want to make sure I account for every minute of your day, your travels when you are not with me. That kind of attitude. So with this music festival, he pressured and pressured me until I finally said, okay, great. And at that time, I was still kind of in the honeymoon phase with him. I did want to spend a lot of time with him. This particular thing, I just didn't care about. I didn't really want to go to it because I'm not a huge heavy metal fan. But I essentially gave in and made the plans. And then when I went there, the town he was living in was a couple hours away from where the concert was. So he loaded the back up with all kinds of alcohol and junk food. And we drove the 2 hours. And because this was a music festival, we were waiting to get in the gates and park for longer than it took us to drive there. We were in the car for so long. So I was getting cranky, tired, hot. We hadn't even got inside the venue yet. And then as soon as we did find a parking space, the alcohol starts. He busts out the alcohol and we're kind of pre-gaming before we ever go in. So by the time we went in there, lots of alcohol already inside both of us. And immediately we go to another alcohol booth and he buys 4 beers. So we each have one in each hand. So pretty soon, I'm just kind of standing there in the crowd, kind of buzzed, and I noticed that he's gone. And when I look in front of me, there's this mosh pit that has formed, and he's in it. He's in this mosh pit. And I'm just watching him going, what is he doing? And I remember watching him for a minute, and then I went, we have had so much alcohol. I really need to go find a bathroom. So I did that. And of course, in a concert venue or a festival venue, it's going to be rows of nasty portable toilets, but it is what it is. So I went in, I managed to go to the bathroom. And when I went back to where the mosh pit was, he was gone. He was nowhere to be found. And so I'm looking around. So then I try to call him. He didn't answer the first 5 or 10 times I called him. I started to panic a little bit. And I tried my boyfriend one more time and he finally answered his phone. So he had gotten back to his car, gotten his phone, and he said, I'm outside the gate and I can't get back in. Once I left, they won't let me back in now. He's like, so you got to come out. I'm like, okay, great. So I go find him and immediately he starts yelling in the parking lot. Where were you? I know you disappeared for some reason. You went to go hook up with somebody, didn't you? And I said, no, I went to the bathroom. Oh, that's the perfect place to hook up with someone. You can't be seen. Yeah, portable toilet. That's where you want to go hook up with somebody. But because he was drunk, there was just no talking to him. I was trying to be reasonable and just say, no, nothing happened. I was looking for you. I had to go to the bathroom. And when I got back out of the bathroom, you had disappeared. And I've been calling you ever since. So we continue to argue. He's headed towards his car. He's got his keys in his hand. And I'm like, you're not driving. You're drunk. He's like, I'm fine. And I said, if you don't want me to drive, we can just chill in the car in the parking lot until one of us feels like we can get us safely back home. And so I grabbed his keys from him, and he immediately grabs my arm, twists it behind my back. I end up on the ground. He grabs the keys, and then he heads toward the car. And I said, I'm not getting in the car with you. He's like, fine, I'm going to leave you then. He starts the car. And he starts driving away. So essentially, he forced me to get into the car because I did not want to be abandoned at this huge venue. So I get in the car with him and we continue to argue. I even sat in the back seat because I wanted to be away from him because he had just wrestled me to the ground. But we're still arguing. And suddenly he is pulling over in a gas station. Lights are off. It's closed because it's well after midnight by this point. And he's like, get out of the car. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm not getting out of the car. Get out of my fucking car. So he forces me out of the car, slams the door, and just drives off and leaves me in this gas station parking lot. I'm still a little buzzed. He's very drunk. And I'm just sitting in there going, oh no. And I am so scared. He does come back within a few minutes, but it was one of those situations where he was trying to prove that he had the control and he had the power to leave me there. He essentially had my life in his hands and he wanted me to know it. So we eventually did get back to his apartment. The fighting continued to the point where I had his cell phone thrown at me. It didn't hit me. It bounced on the floor and into the wall and broke. He destroyed several cell phones in the course of our relationship. And he also grabbed my suitcase, which was a really big one, and he threw it out his front door. So my stuff goes flying out onto the sidewalk and this little grassy area in front of the apartment. My suitcase gets bent because it's just got a little thin metal frame keeping its shape, and he slams the door. So I'm outside, my stuff's outside, and it is late at night, early in the morning, and I don't know what to do. I have a flight leaving in a few hours that day, so my mind immediately goes into survival mode, and I'm thinking, okay, I have my phone at least. I'll just call a cab. I'll cram all my stuff back into the car. I had my purse, so I had my tickets for my flight, and I just started game planning what I was going to do because I had been locked out of this apartment. Again, it didn't take him long to come back out and say, get back in here, get back in the apartment. And I said, no, I can get a ride to the airport. I'll just wait at the airport till my flight leaves. It's like, no, I will take you to the airport. Just get back in here. So I went back in, changed, got my stuff ready to go, and just kind of waited until it was time to actually go to the airport a few hours later. And he dropped me off at the airport. I got my stuff, slammed the door, and just walked away. Went and got on my flight, didn't say goodbye, no hugs, no kisses, nothing like that. And on my way home on the flight and on the drive back to my house, I had time to contemplate what had happened. And it was the first time that I had ever had somebody treat me that way, in a way that was actually physically violent, that controlling, and where I didn't feel safe in the presence of somebody who had said that they loved me. And I really started questioning my judgment of people in that moment. I thought I had had a pretty good sense of people's character, and this really made me start questioning that. And I remember as I was growing up, started dating, talking with my friends, I always said, first time any guy puts his hands on me, I'm out. I'm done. But that started becoming intertwined with, oh, I really like this guy though. And he's got some good points and we have a lot of fun together. And the good times are really great. It's just the bad times that are really bad and make me start questioning things, but they don't happen that often. So that's what started the cycle of kind of up and down. Bad things would happen, but they were few and far between. And the good times were outweighing the bad at that point.
So before we continue here, I think this is the first time we've had someone on the show start telling their story where they flat out have said that I was someone who said if physical abuse would happen, that I would leave, and then that didn't happen. So thank you for coming on and kind of pointing that out, because there's a lot of people out there who think that, and they've never been in these situations. So you've been through this physical abuse, the scary stuff, this control. Something I wanted to chime in earlier, but I didn't want to cut you off, was at the beginning of this story, when you were talking about the pressure to even come out there and about how he is, you made a comment about, your time, something along those lines. So in this early stage here, before this stuff happens, is he occupying your time in so many ways already? Do you have to do check-ins? Are you already on edge without even knowing that you're on edge about your time? But also, is he a time thief in the sense of like when he has his moments where he is free, do you have to be there and constantly have conversations with him? And then after that is over, when he's out doing his own thing, are you concentrating on yourself, or are you worried about everything you're doing and the time you're spending? Are you already fixated 100%, whether you're with him or not with him, on time?
The fixation and the attention to time and when he was going to be available and when I should, heavy quotation marks, be paying attention to my phone, that was established very early on. Because when we were at the point where it was, so much time spent on the phone because we were living apart, he established the expectation. He's like, I work overnights. I drive to my job at this time in the evening. That's when I have free time to talk. So, because he's sleeping up until then, sleeping during the day, working overnight. And within the very first conversations that we had, I would say, no, I can't talk to you right now. This is the time I put my kids to bed. And so you're just going to have to wait. He said, that's messed up. I cannot tell you how many times I heard that's messed up in response to some kind of decision that I made, whether or not to talk to him or spend time with him or go along with something he wanted to do. So yes, it was the expectation that if I knew he had free time, I needed to be available to talk to him because that's the only time we were going to be able to talk. He more than once, because he worked nights, and so on his days off, he was kind of a night owl as well. He would keep me on the phone until very early hours in the morning when he knew I had to get up and then go work a full day that day. So very much a time thief, and very much, and of course it's framed in the, I just want to talk to you. I just want to spend as much time with you as possible, even if it's just on the phone. But what that would do then is create this anxiety in me that if I didn't have my phone, wasn't looking at it all the time, and wasn't responding right away, there was either going to be an argument or I was going to have to explain a very good reason for why I didn't answer right away.
So during this year, you told me that more than once you did break it off with him, but then you'd get sucked back in and you missed the good times and him. Because when he was good, is what you told me. So you do get hoovered back, and then you do get pregnant. So what happens from here?
we find out about a year in that we're going to have a baby. And when that happened, we were both actually super excited. He was very excited. He had one son. He had always wanted to have a big family. And I loved having kids, even though I hadn't wanted another one. When I found out that I was having another one, I was very excited about it. And his parents were super excited. They only had the one grandson. They were really excited to have another one. My parents were a bit ambivalent because between them and my sister, they had kind of read his personality a little bit and were not super thrilled. They didn't really like him that much. So when the pregnancy happened, I felt like I had a lot of explaining to do, even though I was 37 years old and an adult and an established one and all of that. I still wanted my parents to be okay with me and the decisions I was making. So that was rough. That was really rough. Really happy on one side, not so happy on the other side of the family. In making the decisions as to what we were going to do going forward, he said the best thing for us to do would be for me to quit my job and my career, which was very much established, and move to where he was because, and this is an argument I heard more than once, there was just no industry for him here. He worked at a nuclear power plant. He was a security guard. As he would put it, he rattled doorknobs for a living. It's like, you can do that anywhere. But his logic was, no, you need to come to me. So I did. And I left my two kids here because, they had a dad. So just gut instinct, I really did not want my older children to be moved to Southern California. I don't know what it was. And I feel like now looking back on it, it was kind of my instinct that I really didn't want them exposed to him and the inner workings of our relationship. But now I had this baby that I needed to take care of. I didn't want to separate him from his dad. So, okay, great. I will move down there. And one of the things he said to me, which I found a little odd, was he said, just give me a year. If it doesn't work out in a year, you can dump my ass. And I was like, well, that's a strange thing to say. But at the same time, as weird as it was, it gave me hope. I'm like, oh, okay, I have an out if I need it. So great. We rented a U-Haul. He flew from California to here so that we could drive my car with my stuff in the U-Haul back to his apartment, his bachelor pad, essentially, and prepare to have this baby. And one of the things that I've heard a lot in people's stories is road rage. If he was behind the wheel, everyone else on the road was an idiot, and it was his job to teach them a lesson and teach them how to drive from behind the wheel of his car. If I decided I couldn't take his road raging and I drove, I was the worst driver in the world. He was constantly, they call it backseat driving, where he's trying to coach me and tell me things under the guise of keeping us safe. And he would constantly fiddle with the radio too. He was constantly flipping through stations. And I am not exaggerating one bit when it was constant for hours on end. He could not land on a station and keep it there. So that was this whole other form of distraction while I was trying to drive. At one point, he literally saw a board in the road while I was driving. I was already seeing it slowing down. I was going to slow down enough to drive over it and not destroy my car. But in his mind, it was better to swerve to miss it. So he grabbed the wheel while I was driving the car. And that instance created this anxiety in me that never went away after that. Every time we got in a vehicle together, I started having a trauma response because it's like, what is going to happen now? And it really kicked off that constant state of fear that I was in. You hear about fight, flight, freeze, appease. I was constantly going between those things when we were in the car together. So that was a learning experience for me, because that just started that uptight phase that I was in all the time for the next decade and a half. We eventually moved from California back to our hometown. That's where I live now. And As we were starting our life with this brand new baby, we would continue to travel back and forth to Oregon to see our parents so that the baby could visit with them, right? And he was almost a year old, our son was. And my ex's birthday, we went out to dinner. We had both of our kids. So we had his son and our son. And we went out to a restaurant to celebrate his birthday. And when you have a baby, you have a lot of stuff. And that stuff goes in a giant bag that you carry everywhere you go because you want to be prepared for any situation that might happen, whether it's, diapers, new clothes, feeding, whatever it might be. And because we had this diaper bag, my ex's stuff ended up in there a lot. So he would put his wallet in there, his keys in there, his phone, because he didn't want the stuff in his pockets. And he's like, well, I've got this woman carrying a diaper bag. She might as well carry my stuff too. So we went out to dinner. And of course, I always carried the diaper bag. He was carrying the baby. And I went to use the restroom before we left the restaurant. So the diaper bag was with me. And as I was finishing up in there, I could see his phone in the front pocket of the diaper bag, and I could see that it was ringing. Neither one of us ever had our ringers on. But when you have, a smartphone, you can see that there's a call coming in. So when I looked at the phone, there was a name coming in, a woman's name that I didn't recognize. And this man, when he would put somebody into his phone as a contact, he would put their name and then he would put like how he knew them. So he'd put like Jeff, work. So that kind of thing. And so when I was looking at this name, it was this female name and then it said POF next to it. POF, I came to find out, was Plenty of Fish, which is a dating app. So apparently this is a woman who he had met on a dating app, which I knew he'd been on dating apps before we met. He had told me that. He had been a bachelor for so long. I was not surprised he'd been on dating apps. That's just what people do. And I didn't answer the phone, but I went, what? Why is this person calling him? So I opened his phone and I saw this text conversation where he and this individual were planning to meet at a ballpark and catch a baseball game in the upcoming weekend while I was out of town. And I was crushed. I spent several more minutes in that bathroom because I was so angry. I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I thought, what is he doing? Because there was a whole full-on conversation in there where they were flirting back and forth and making these plans. And I was about 10 months postpartum. That sounds like a long time, but when you have a kid in your 30s, you don't bounce back as fast. And I knew he'd had an extensive dating history, and it just struck me wrong. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am just not attractive to him anymore. I had low self-esteem at that point in time. My body image was terrible. And so I thought, oh, well, no wonder he is seeking to spend time with other people. I feel gross, so he must think I'm gross too. And it really started this thought that I had that I was not enough. And I also at the same time was thinking, I've seen him have conversations like this with people the entire time we've been together. Maybe this is just something he's never going to stop doing. Maybe this is something I just need to learn to live with. Because maybe if I do that, he'll chill out and stop being so controlling of what I'm doing, right? That's kind of how I was trying to logic it out in my mind. I was like, well, this is just how he is. So I'm going to be the cool girlfriend and just let him do his thing. But he needs to leave me alone about who I need to text, if I need to text my ex or if I have male friends on Facebook or whatever it might be. So I started just getting this attitude, well, I got to do what I got to do to get along because I don't want to lose this guy. And I don't want to jeopardize that. So that kind of started a kind of an erosion of standards that I'd had, further erosion, right? And that just seemed like the logical next step for me. So that was very frustrating and irritating period. We did eventually move back to Oregon and I started feeling a little bit stronger and more supported because my family was here. My parents were here. My sister was here. His parents were here. And my friends were here. So I was golden here. When we got back here, I was the one working and he did not. We determined financially it was going to be better for him to be stay-at-home dad and I would work. And so my day-to-day would literally be wake up, go to work, and come home. It was just routine stuff. I didn't think much about him because we were doing that cycle. It's that kind of traditional cycle of violence that you hear about when you talk about domestic violence cases where things can go along really well for a long time. And then there starts to be a buildup and then there's a blow up. And for this period in time, when we first moved back to Oregon, the blow ups were not happening that often. They really weren't. And so I felt like, oh my gosh, okay, now that we're back here, he's calm here. I'm calm here. This is great. This was a great idea. This was a great move for us. Occasionally, there would be a fight about something, usually having to do with a text from somebody that I would see coming in and go, who's that? Or him wanting to go out and just do more stuff. But we had a young baby at home, so that really wasn't logical to do. So for a number of years, kind of right there in the middle, things were good. It seemed good. And then we bought a home, and that was great too. We were excited about that. And so that took a lot of our focus for a while, fixing that place up, moving in, and that kind of thing. And then I would say about halfway through our relationship, we were 15 years together. Halfway through, we're settled. Our son is getting older, right? He's 6-7 years old now. That's when these intense controlling behaviors start again. And even though we live together, he's clearly looking at my Facebook more often because he'll come and ask me, well, who's this person? I've never seen this person on your profile before. And I'm like, well, just because you haven't seen them doesn't mean they weren't there. I've had that person on my profile for a long time. Did you date? Did you love them? And I would just get these grilling questions about the nature of my relationship with particular people on Facebook. And it didn't matter if it was a man or a woman. I'm heterosexual, that's straight up. I've never had intimate relationships with women, but that didn't matter because he was going to question me about that. And so I'm like, all right. And then again, I would see things like a phone call coming in. I'm like, I don't recognize this name. Who's this? Like, oh, just a friend from the next county over that so-and-so introduced me to. I'm like, oh, why don't you answer the phone? Why don't you talk to your friend? So then he'd have to explain to me how he met this person and why they were calling him. And so it's right here in this point in time where I really start noticing the connection between him questioning me about a person or an interaction and then me, whether purposely or inadvertently, finding out about an interaction that he was having. This is when the word projection starts running rampant in my brain because I can see it very clearly happening. So this is when I also start journaling. And the journaling piece is hugely important for me because I was not in a place where I wanted to tell anyone what was happening between me and him because we'd had a kid, we'd now bought a house. There, in my mind, I'm not going to break up with them. And I know that if I tell the people that I love about the things that he has done over the years and is starting to continue to do to me, they're just going to say, dump him. And I'm just not in a place where I want to justify not dumping him. So I start to journal instead. And when I was preparing for this, I looked back on just some choice examples of things that I would journal because I would just write short little sentences as soon as something happened, just so I wouldn't forget it. So I could just get it out and not argue with him about it. I would let it out into the universe by writing it down. And he was still giving me crap about the way I drove. He told me repeatedly, I'm not worth marrying. I never wanted to marry him anyway, but he thought that was an insult. He told me my family was crazy. When I would do his laundry, he said, you're folding my shirts wrong. So I refused to do his laundry anymore. He said, I was washing the towels wrong because he wanted them done a certain way. When we would order food and his was wrong, he would tell me I had ordered it on purpose. So one of his other catchphrases was, "You did that shit on purpose." He would have, I called them revenge flings. So it would either be a texting relationship with somebody, or he would actually meet somebody somewhere in town, but tell me he was meeting somebody else. He would eventually let these things slip or come clean about them. Or if I'm being honest, I would look in his phone whenever I could get my hands on him, because I knew at this point in time he couldn't be trusted. So I peeked in his phone a lot, and I don't regret it at all, because it really confirmed some of the things that I was feeling inside, and let me know that I wasn't crazy for thinking some of the things I was thinking. He, quite frankly, is a bit of a racist. He gets that from his dad. He has no empathy for anyone. And I work in a field where I have a great amount of empathy for humans. That's what I do. I'm in human services. So he would call me naive for being empathetic with people. The road rage thing, that never stopped. And it got to a point where I would never let him drive, and I would just have to tune him out as we were driving somewhere, because there was just no way I was going to let him drive. One time he slammed his meal into the trash can because he had tried to feed me something out of his hands, and I went like this. So he got mad and threw his entire meal into the garbage can. So I wrote that down. He would do things like slam on the brakes when we were arguing right in the middle of the road, even though we had a baby and a car seat in the back. He broke things of mine. He kicked my bedside table, broke it. He threw a remote across the room into my china hutch. The china that I had inherited from my grandmother was there, broke pieces of that with a remote control. He slapped me one time and kind of wrestled me to the ground again, and then said, "Oh, I thought you liked that. I thought you enjoyed that, having it a little rough." And I'm like, what? And he smashed several cell phones during the course of our relationship. He would either throw them against the wall, or one that I bought him, like outright bought for him because he had destroyed the other one, he bent in half and broke it just because he was mad at me. So those are the kind of things that I wrote down, because I was like, I feel crazy, but I'm seeing these things in black and white, and I know that I'm not, because these things are happening. I also, when I started journaling, started jotting down the names of women that I knew he'd had some sort of interaction with. And when I talk about interaction, I call it, he was acting like a single man. And that included things like having very explicit text exchanges with people. He would exchange explicit photos with people. I found audio recordings that were very explicit on his phone. And he actually, at one point, had a full-blown affair with a woman in another town while he was traveling out of town for work. And by the time I rattled off the top of my head the names, the women whose names I knew, there were 20 of them. And those were just the ones I knew about. So it was in the process of doing this journaling, recording things, that I remember writing down, "I want out." That was the point when I saw it in black and white and saw these behaviors just repeating themselves over and over again, where I went, "No, I'm done. I want out." And so that kind of started the beginning of the end of the relationship. And mind you, this is still only, like halfway in. So it took a long time for it to actually end. Towards the end of our relationship, I had tried more than one time to talk to him about how I was feeling, and I tried to physically end it to his face. I tried to say, "Look, this is not working for me. We don't do well together. You can have the house. We can decide on custody of our son. I'm just not happy. And this environment that we are living in is really taking a toll on me, physically and mentally." And he was not having it. We would argue about it for a few hours. He would decide the point at which he wanted to stop arguing, and then he would immediately start sucking up to me. He'd try to say, "Oh, I love you. I think we should go on more date nights. I think we should start over, like from the beginning. Like, this is the first time we're meeting. Like, that was going to fix everything. So essentially, he was saying to my face, I want to love bomb you again. I want to go back to the honeymoon phase. That'll fix everything. I ended up going on a trip. And by this point in time, it's in the year that I broke up with him. I had started just not agreeing with anything that he would ask me or say to me or want me to do. I was fighting back hard. In the course of a 15-year relationship, kind of towards the beginning, middle there, I would try to go along to get along. But my natural instincts started coming back again, especially once we moved back to Oregon. So by that last year, I was just full blown, I'm back and you're not going to treat me this way and I'm going to do something about it. And so when I turned 50 a couple of years ago, I planned a big trip. I was going to go see both of my best friends, one who lives in the state next to me and one who lives in the South. And in the process of doing that, I was going to go to Las Vegas and attend a conference that I'd wanted to attend for several years. And I was not going to include him in this process. And I told him that. He had tried planning a big 50th birthday blowout for both of us because we're the same age and our birthdays are about 6 weeks apart. And I just said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to make plans and I'm going to go do something on my own. Every time I would bring up the trip, which I tried not to do because I knew he would say something rude about it, something would happen. Oh, are you going to go get up to shenanigans while you're there? Are you going to go hook up? Just derogatory things, because his philosophy was nothing good happens in Vegas. And when he went to Vegas, of course, nothing good happened there. But when I went to Vegas, I was going to go to a conference and I wasn't even going to leave the hotel. So my brain was just not in that space. On the way to Vegas, I went to one friend's house who I hadn't been in touch with for quite a while. And when I stayed at her house and we reconnected, I discovered that she was going through the exact same thing that I was going through with her husband, her soon-to-be ex. So we stayed up late into the night comparing stories. Neither one of us had known what was going on with the other one. And I started to feel this overwhelming form of validation talking to her. I flew from her city to Vegas, attended my conference. And then from Vegas, I flew to Memphis to see my other best friend, who I hadn't seen in quite a while. And we rented an Airbnb. We went and did all kinds of fun things and just had a blast. And throughout my trip, as I expected, I was getting many, many text messages. You're not communicating with me enough. Oh, are you having a good time? Are you hooking up with some of your friends' husband's Navy buddies? Just these horrible derogatory things. And I had told this friend a little bit about what was going on, but every time on this trip, every time I got a text, I would show it to her. And I said, tell me, would your husband ever speak this way to you? And she said, no, absolutely not. And if he did, he knows what would happen. So in going on this trip, I got this enormous validation from my two best friends about what I was going through and the fact that, yeah, girl, you should get out of there. If that's what you want to do, that's what you should do, because he's obviously making you miserable. And I was also in that process letting people in and letting them know what was going on and feeling more and more strength the more people knew that this was the right thing to do, that I definitely wanted to get out of there, and that I had the people closest to me behind me. They were on my side and they had my back about whatever decision I was going to make. So that was a huge turning point for me, because right before I flew home and we checked out of the Airbnb, my best friend said to me, August. And I was like, August? Because the trip happened in late April. August, you're going to be out of there by August. And I was like, all right, August. And so we kind of made this agreement that I was going to be out of there by August. So I flew home and just was on eggshells, pins and needles the entire time, because at this point I was checked out. I was completely checked out of the relationship. but I had to pretend like I wasn't. And I know a lot of people could probably relate to when they're in a situation like this, they've made some decisions or they're trying to keep things calm. They have to act like things are perfectly normal because they want to keep things peaceful as they can. They don't want any more arguing, and they don't want the other person to find out what's going on. So that's what I was doing. I was trying to keep the peace. I had connected with a therapist at that point in time, and the intention was to have her help me get some tools to deal with my life until I could change it. But what she really ended up doing was, again, confirming and validating that even though this wasn't a situation where you're getting beaten up every day, this relationship is causing you mental and physical harm, and it is not sustainable. And it's okay for you to leave. It's okay. She literally said, it's okay for you to leave. So I really started full force, making plans at that point in time. And this is when I really started diving deeply into things like books, podcasts, research. And I actually joined a couple of online groups of survivors of abuse who would post their stories, whether anonymously or not. And so I would interact with people on there just to not only validate them and say, hey, I see you, but to kind of get some validation in return. So that really helped me keep my resolve, was hearing other people's stories over and over again and hearing myself in their stories. So that helped me just stay strong. So I saved money. I looked for places to move into because I had 2 adult children and a teenage child that I wanted to move in with me. I also had 2 dogs, and we wanted to get cats too. So I'm like, okay, we got to find a perfect house that can accommodate all of these things. And I eventually did, and rallied my inner circle behind me. And then I picked a day and said, okay, this is the day. This time I'm going to unplug our Wi-Fi so that he can't see the Ring cameras or the other security cameras that he had put up all over the house by this point in time. Y'all need to be here. We're going to put all the stuff in a trailer and we're out. So that's what we did. My family and friends swooped in, grabbed all of our stuff. I picked my youngest son up from school that day and explained to him, Dad and I don't get along and I can't live with him anymore. I said, we can go by the house and you can see if there's anything that I missed that's in your room that you want to bring with us. But then we have another house that we're going to go live in. And he was a little confused, but by this time he was a teenager and he knew what the relationship was like between the 2 of us. And he had more than once listened to his father berating me for one thing or another. And he would catch my eyes and he'd just roll his eyes. This kid is mature beyond his years, and he knew what was going on. So we left, and that kind of started the next chapter, kind of the final chapter, where I made my escape, and I was still in the same town with him, and I wasn't going to restrict him from seeing our son. That custody battle, that never happened. I'm like, no, you come get him whenever you want to. Visit him whenever you want. That's not going to be something that I use against you. He needs his dad in his life. So I would drop him off or he'd come pick him up. It worked fine as it could. And what was going on with him is he was still bombarding me with messages. I would only accept text messages from him. I wouldn't talk to him on the phone. In the next 14 months, I only physically saw him 2 times, and that was completely by accident, and it was from a distance. He drove past me one time when I was dropping our son off from school, and then I drove to his work and parked way across the parking lot so that our son could take something to him, and then that's it. I only saw him twice in the next 14 months. And I was trying to be as civil as possible, and he was relentless. He would text me about, do you want to go do this? Do you want to go do that? No. I would answer him no. Do you want to buy this thing? And I would be like, no, I don't want to buy this thing. Our son needs braces. If you want to buy something, buy his braces. And he would swing wildly back and forth between begging me to see him do things with him, insulting me, calling me names. You always wanted control. I know you left me for someone else. You just need to come clean about who it is, things like that. Or he'd then flirt with me. And I learned over the 14 months after we separated that he had access to my socials. And he had actually logged in as me on Messenger several times for several people, pretending to be me so that he could try to gather information about what kind of interactions I was having with that person. And he also would go to friends of ours that we had in common and ask them, who's she seeing? I know she's seeing somebody. There's no reason she would leave me beyond leaving me for somebody. And one friend in particular who he had known since he was in grade school, he asked her who I was seeing, and she said she doesn't have time or bandwidth to see anybody. She is not seeing anyone. And he never spoke to her again after that. Never. And they had been friends since they were in grade school, but because she wasn't useful to him in that moment, he discarded her. And it was exhausting. It was just exhausting. I continued to see my therapist, talk to her, and I cried a lot. I would get so frustrated. Even if I didn't answer his text messages, it would frustrate me so badly that he was even talking to me about things besides our son that I would just cry. Or I'd call my sister and I'd take a walk and I would just yell into the phone about the latest thing that he had done. And I had taken a break from my therapist for a while, but then I would get so frustrated that I'd be like, oh my gosh, can we talk? I need to decompress. And I even had a couple of panic attacks during this time. I had never had a panic attack in my life, but I experienced 2 different times while driving in traffic, just not being able to breathe, crying uncontrollably, and not knowing what was wrong with me. And that had never happened before. So eventually, though, and when I say eventually, it took a good 6 or 7 months, I would just ignore the texts. And unless it was about our son, I would just ignore it, and then I would forget about it. My brain would just block it out, so it wouldn't impact me as much. I started not having to see my therapist as much. I'd gotten back to a really good place and was solid. I was taking more trips to do things that I wanted to do, hanging out with my friends. I bought a new home, right? I moved out of a rental, bought a big old house that could accommodate me, my kids, and all the pets that we wanted, fenced-in yard, the whole bit. And when I was in high school, I played the clarinet. I started playing my clarinet again after 30 years and started going to a community band and all this kinds of things. And things were just going great. My ex took our son to Thailand. They had a great trip together. They had a lot of fun, built a lot of memories. And whenever he would text me and say something that I felt was inappropriate, I'd just be like, whatever. And I was able to let it roll off at that point. So I was in a really good place. And then suddenly he dies. Just this year, a few months ago, it was Super Bowl Sunday, which was in February. And his parents appeared on my front porch, which was very unusual. And I open the door and step out on the porch, and his dad tells me he was killed in a head-on collision driving home from somewhere he had been for the weekend. He had been on a trip to go ride motorcycles with a very good friend of his in Central Oregon. He had actually, the very last texts I have from him are him begging me to go on this trip with him and to go buy motorcycles with him. And when his dad said he was killed in a head-on collision, I just dropped. I remember falling back against the wall on my porch and saying, oh my God, oh my God. And the 2 feelings that I remember very clearly are loss immediately, because this is the father of my child and we spent 15 years together, and relief. And then right on the heels of relief, I was like, oh my gosh, now I feel guilty because I'm relieved that I'm not going to have to hear from this person again. It was a very odd mix, and it was sickening. It was literally nauseating, this feeling I was having inside. Despite everything that had happened between the 2 of us, I immediately, like that very night, jumped into action, calling his brother, talking to his brother, calling his other son so that the two boys, my son and his older brother, could talk to each other because they just lost their dad. And I knew instinctively that I was going to be very much in the middle of laying this man to rest because I'd been with him for 15 years. We weren't married, but we might as well have been because I knew everything about him. Well, almost everything about him. I just jumped into action. I was going to be the one ultimately who called his friends and let them know what was going on. His parents didn't know who to call. And he, labeled them in his phone in weird ways sometimes. So they weren't going to know who some of these people were. And I did. I knew where information in his house was going to be because, when somebody passes away, you got to find financials. You got to find if there's any assets that need to be declared, if he's got any kind of insurance policies. I knew where all that stuff was going to be. And we were going to need to do a service. So I knew what music he liked. I knew who to contact for photos. Since he was in the Army, I knew that he was going to have to be dressed in a dress uniform. And I knew all the pieces that went into that. So I took that on and I even ended up writing his obituary because when I went over to visit his parents, his mom brought out this form and she said, the funeral home gave us this to help us write the obituary. And she said, I don't have any idea where to start. And I said, I will do it. So I wrote my ex's obituary and I was happy to do it to support them. And in my mind, I kept thinking, this is the last thing that I can do on earth for this man. And I'm okay with that. Again, empathy. I have empathy. Even though he drove me absolutely crazy for 15 years and I didn't want to be in a relationship with anymore, I had a lot of sympathy and empathy for him because I knew he was hurt by me leaving. And I knew he was hurt by not being able to see his son as often as he wanted to. And, I still probably felt a little bit of guilt for leaving him like I did, even though it was for the best for me. So that started this really delicate balance that I ended up having to maintain where I was calling his friends and they were singing his praises. Most of them didn't know that we were broken up, even though it had happened more than a year before because he didn't tell them. He told a few, so a few of them knew. Most of them didn't. And they were beside themselves. And of course, his parents were devastated. His brother was devastated. But my inner circle, my parents, my sister, my closest friends knew that he was not a good partner. He was a terrible boyfriend, and they knew all the things that he had done to me. So I kind of had to do this balance of rage with my inner circle, but, oh, I am so sorry for your loss to his friends and his family. And I also had to hear, sorry for your loss. I knew that it was going to get very deep again, but I didn't know how deep. So I ended up having to go into his house and go through every inch of his property so that I could find documents and we could itemize the things in his estate so that they could be divided between his two sons. This was a 3-bedroom house he was living in, and this thing was stuffed to the gills, full of just things, mementos, photos, papers, uniforms, clothing. He took up the entire guest room of that house with just stuff, souvenirs and clothing and things like that he had for 20 years and didn't want to get rid of. And so in the course of going through all of his stuff, my family was there for part of it and they helped me kind of sort through things. They would bring something to me. Yes, no, what is this? And we'd either toss it or we'd put it in a pile to sell later, or we would throw it in the fire that we had going in the backyard. So I had to kind of come face to face with things that were proof of things that he had done during our relationship that I thought I had processed through and had let go. But when you come across a receipt and a motel room key that were kept as a memento, because he would literally write on them when it was from and who he was with, and your parents and your sister are standing next to you while you register what this is and then kind of explain what it is, that is rough. It is very rough. And he had things in his possession, like I found a partially used box of condoms. Well, he kept the receipt with it. He purchased those while we were together. We weren't using them. So I'm like, oh, okay. He was using these somewhere. I was given one of his phones, not the phone that was with him when he was in the accident, but the one he had before that. And that was the phone his dad gave me to try to contact his friends. So knowing him like I did, I knew what the passcode was. So I was going through his phone to try to find phone numbers for people that I needed to let know that he had died, and found conversations, more photographs than I ever cared to see. And I even found conversations that he had with people that said, dude, I know you're not single. Stop texting me. And he would keep on. He would keep bugging them and try to pull them back into interacting with him. And then he kept those conversations where he'd been rejected. And it was just nuts. I mean, I found hard copy letters that he had written to his two previous wives, because he'd been married twice before. And I could see in those letters where he had those controlling behaviors with them too. He would say things about who they were interacting with and things like that. And it was just one of those situations where one of the craziest incidents that we had, and I say we because I let my sister look at the phone, was we saw very intimate photographs of people that myself and my ex had gone to high school with. And then I had to interact with them at his funeral. They were coming up to me and saying to my face, "I'm so sorry for your loss," and giving me a hug. And it was weird. It was the weirdest experience I've ever had in my life. And the work that I had done to get through the trauma that I experienced with this man just took a beating. My mental health took a beating. All these old feelings came back. I felt resentful. I felt angry. I felt inadequate. And there were so many moments when I would see a text or a picture, or somebody would come up to me and say, "Just so you know, he told me right before he left that he has no idea why you left him, but he was trying to be a better person." And I would just want to scream. I imagined myself getting in his face and just screaming in his face, "Why did you do this? Do you see how wrong this is?" And I couldn't do that. So I spent a lot of time while I was cleaning out his house, the times that I was alone, just screaming at the things in his house. And again, burning his crap in the backyard whenever I could. I started to have this kind of healing moment too, as I was going through his stuff and just kind of letting it go. One of the exercises that my therapist recommend that I do is write something on a rock that he had done and throw it in the river so I could just be gone with it. And I think burning some of his stuff kind of did that for me. So the letters, pictures, things like that. So that started to kind of help put things back together for me. I leaned very, very hard on the support system that I knew I had, like my parents, my sister, my girlfriends. They actually came to the funeral. They flew in just to sit behind me and put their hands on my shoulder so that they knew that I knew they were there. And because they knew what he had done. They were there when I walked up to his coffin, looked him in the face and said, "I forgive you for what you did. Now I want you to watch over our son. That's all I want from you now." And that was really helpful. And, one of the final things I did is I was one of his pallbearers. And I walked him. I literally walked this man to his grave. And as hard as everything was with him and as much crap that he had pulled on me, I felt like now that he was gone, he had been made aware wherever he is at now that he had done a lot of bad things. My therapist gave me a really good saying. She said, "Now that he's gone, all is revealed." And I said, yes, that is exactly how I feel. So I believe what has been helping me is that he knows exactly what he did. He knows how much pain he caused now. And even though he can't do anything about it, he knows. And that's good. That's good for me. That's been helping me kind of heal from it. And my son and I have also talked about the fact that we feel like he's still around, keeping an eye out, hopefully on him more than me. But I fully feel that spiritual wise, he's not the same person wherever he's at that he was here. And he knows. And that's been very helpful for me.
And if you had any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
My words of wisdom are to trust your instincts. And I know that's kind of a cliche, but trusting your instincts, trusting our instincts is one of those ultimate acts of rebellion when you are dealing with a person like this. If something feels wrong, even a little bit, trust that it is wrong. You don't need this huge pile of evidence to justify the fact that you don't feel good in this relationship and you deserve peace. And you don't owe this person who is trying to destroy your life and your personality and your soul bit by bit, you don't owe them anything. Your intuition is one of the most valuable things that you have. And even though you may be called paranoid, it's your compass. It's protecting you. And it is the way that you can find your way back to yourself. And I encourage you to listen to it the first time that it speaks to you.
Well, Remy, I really want to thank you for being here with us today. You just didn't cover a lot. You went into like the nitty gritty of things, those little fine details that are so valuable for everyone to hear and to be validated by. And then also talking about something we don't really talk about in this episode, which is when they pass away and everything that can come flooding back and the retraumatization of all of that. And you dealt with it in, a different way. I mean, you were still at this point treated like you were their partner still and having to deal with all of that. So just a really big thank you for, coming here and talking about it and sharing and just validating everyone today.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you once again, Remy, for being here with us today. And if you want to be a guest like Remy was today, go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, click on the guest form button, fill out the form, press the submit button, and we'll go from there. We also have a support group at our website with Zoom meetings every Wednesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. And we also at our website have a newsletter that you can join, and you get a free workbook from every new survivor story when you sign up to our newsletter. And this is all at narcissistapocalypse.com. And that is it for today's survivor story, today's episode. So for myself and Remy, we hope you have a good night.